you know, it's interesting, all the leaks to the corrupt left media. So you have this leak to the Washington Post regarding these prosecutors and what's going on in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And now we have a leak to CNN about John Roberts and what he was doing in the Dobbs case, desperately trying to get one of the other justices to go along with him so that Roe versus Wade, in effect, could be upheld. This is the same John Roberts who destroyed our healthcare system by switching at the very end to join the four leftists for Obamacare. So John Roberts has been a force for disaster on the Supreme Court. He's no William Rehnquist, who he replaced. And when I worked in the Reagan administration, and he worked in the Reagan administration, he was a fairly young man who was an assistant to the first Attorney General in the Reagan administration. Roberts would write these memos, some of which came up during his confirmation hearings for the court, and they were real bomb thrower memos that were not being aggressive enough. He would pass judgment on justices and so forth. Now you see what he's turned into. There's a reason why the Roberts and the Thomas Friedman family are such close friends, because John Roberts does not want to be viewed as a constitutional originalist, you see. And this is what happens in Washington, D.C. That's why they're to move the damn capital to somewhere else. It really is a swamp. It's really quite awful. Anyway, let's check this out. Go.
We're beginning this hour with new CNN reporting that takes us behind the scenes, revealing just how close the Supreme Court came to saving Roe v. Wade. According to multiple sources, Chief Justice John Roberts fought to the bitter end, trying to convince his fellow conservative justices to preserve the constitutional right to abortion. But it was the unprecedented leak of a draft opinion reversing Roe that may have doomed Roberts' efforts.
New details obtained by CNN reveal the high-stakes internal abortion rights drama that intensified in April when the justices first learned the draft opinion would soon be published. Tensions over the fate of Roe were only heightened by an investigation into the source of the leak that diminished whatever chance Roberts had to dislodge the 5-justice bloc set to overturn the abortion ruling.
Joining us to share her fascinating new reporting here is CNN legal analyst Joan Biskupic. Joan, tell us how hard he was fighting to bring some folks over to his side.
Morning, Brianna and John. Extremely hard. He was trying week after week after the initial vote in December, after oral arguments, in which 5 of the justices on the far right voted to...
All right, hold on. First of all, it's obvious somebody close to Roberts leaked this. Secondly, what is this far-right crap? They uphold the Constitution. They explain themselves in the majority opinion. They point out a fact, an indisputable fact, that abortion isn't an issue that the court should be making decisions on, since there's nothing in the Constitution in the slightest or in our history that gives the court that kind of authority. It's left to the people of the states and the state legislatures, that is, representative parts of our government at the lowest levels, and that's right wing, the right wingers on the court. I just can't stand this. It's such disgusting and dishonest kind of phony reporting. Go ahead.
Turn Roe. Roberts was alone in the middle, wanting to uphold this Mississippi 15-week ban on abortion.
So you can see, and Roberts does this a lot, he or others leak on his behalf to promote Roberts. Here was the Solomon of our time. He didn't want to cut the baby in half, so to speak. And he just couldn't bring the right-wingers to join with the rational liberals. He did his very, very best, but he couldn't pull it off. Poor John, trying to save the republic. Go ahead.
But not go further than Roe. And then, of course, you had the 3 liberals saying, we don't want to do any of this.
See, they're liberals. They're not left-wingers. You got the right-wingers and the liberals. Go ahead.
We don't want to disrupt abortion rights at all. So Roberts keeps trying, and it's interesting, Brianna, that not only did his work affect, his efforts toward the 2 newest justices, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney-Barrett, but it had an effect on the others. The hard right justices became concerned.
Oh, the hard right justices. The hard right justices. Go ahead.
That he could be successful. You know, the chief has himself switched votes in the past, and he has also been able to pick off justices on the far conservative side for a more of a moderate centrist decision in certain cases. So they became anxious about what he was up to. And the liberals, who had such a defeat this session, started to have some hope that maybe Roe would not be overturned completely. But then on May 2nd, when the draft of the opinion was released and everything went public, it made John Roberts' efforts all the harder, because he's a man who likes to work privately, in secret, offering some concessions himself, seeking concessions for some sort of, you know, as I say, cross-ideological compromise. And it went down to the wire, according to my sources. But in the end, he made no headway.
The first vote, which I learned only from your reporting, was back in December. I mean, it was earlier than I think we had realized. You said it went down to the wire, though. Did either Kavanaugh or Amy Coney-Barrett ever give any reason to anyone to believe that they were going to side with Roberts on this?
That's a great question, John. And I wanted to know, especially with Brett Kavanaugh, who often will, you know, sound ambivalent and send mixed signals, but in the end stick with the far right, to see just...
Oh, the far right again. That's 4 occasions. 4 occasions. Stick with the far right. And this is one of the reasons why the public is really ignorant about how the court works. It's just like some political thing, and then we have the far right, you know, the white supremacists, and that would include, of course, Clarence Thomas, the second black on the court. The far right and the more liberal justices. But the far right, 4 times she said it. Go ahead.
Encouragement he might have given the chief. As I understand it, his vote was solid, but he never said that he wasn't going to listen to the chief. So the chief kept trying. The thing that happened...
This is where she's filling in the gaps with her own imagination. Go ahead.
That, as I said, really thwarted things was when it was clear to the public how Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett had voted. It locked them in more than might have been expected at that point. It made it all the more difficult. And, you know, I do think that Brett Kavanaugh, despite what he said during his confirmation hearing, and despite the way that he has sort of really publicly wrung his hands on this issue, was likely never going to switch. He was probably never going to change after he first said that he wanted to reverse Roe. His signal from the bench during those oral arguments, John, in December before they took that vote was, you know, pretty strong. It's just that he has been in play before, and the chief just...
All right, she's a rambling buffoon, too. You notice, ladies and gentlemen, how this works? This is the only decision they care about. There are other major decisions. This is it. So the media take the side of the radical anti-life groups and organizations. This network, CNN, has never discussed what it means to support the left on the court, or the Democrat Party, or these movements in terms of aborting a baby. They have never discussed it at any length. They've never shown with graphics or documentaries or videos or anything what it means to abort a baby a week before birth. They've never shown anything. But we have the far-right justice. When did it become far-right to protect babies? When did it become far-right to actually apply the Constitution? When did it become far-right not to be an activist to impose your own personal preferences on the nation? Now that's far-right. And now you can see how corrupt the media are and why I wrote Unfreedom of the Press. She's a fraud, and they're all frauds. And if I had been sitting there, I would have questioned her. You keep saying far-right. And yet when it comes to the left, you talk about liberals. And you said it 4 times, 3.5 times, 4th time was even worse. And then I would ask her, well, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Kavanaugh? First you say he's malleable, then you say he was never going to be malleable. Well, which is it? And then I would ask another question. Why don't we spend 5 minutes on this network, CNN, and show and explain what it means to abort a baby at 8 months and 3 weeks. Let's show them. Yeah, well, from my lips to God's ears.
For more, sign up for Levin TV.